Kaya was just a little girl, no older than 8, but her heart was as big as anyone's. She had been taught by her mother to always be kind, always help others, even if it was just a small gesture. It was something Kaya took to heart, not because she wanted attention or praise, but because it simply felt right. Her world was full of love and care, and she saw no reason not to share that with anyone she met. It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. Kaya had just finished school and was walking home, her little backpack bouncing on her back. The sun was still bright, but the air had that crisp feeling, letting her know that fall was settling in. Kaya loved the change of seasons. It meant that school would soon give way to winter break, but for now, she had to walk home. On the way, as she passed her usual route through the park, something unusual caught her eye. Near a bench, there sat a man. His clothes were old and dirty, his hair unkempt, and his face looked tired. He looked like he had been through a lot. Kaya stopped in her tracks. She had seen people like him before, people who seemed to live on the streets or in the park. But this time, she felt something different, a pull in her heart that told her to do something. The man looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, they both just stood there, a silent understanding passing between them. Kaya saw something in his eyes. There was no anger, no bitterness, just exhaustion. She felt a little scared, but not in the way one might expect. It wasn't fear of danger. It was more the fear of not knowing what to do or how to help. But then, she remembered what her mother always told her. If you see someone in need, give what you can, no matter how small. Kaya looked down at the sandwich in her hands. It was her lunch, her only meal of the day, packed with care by her mother that morning. It wasn't much, just a simple peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But to her, it was a part of the routine, part of the comfort she felt during her busy day. But right then, looking at the man, she realized it wasn't just a sandwich. It was an opportunity to do something kind. She walked up to him slowly, feeling a little shy but determined. The man didn't say anything at first, but his tired eyes softened as Kaya stopped in front of him. Kaya, without any hesitation, held out the sandwich. "Here," she said quietly. "I think you're hungry." The man blinked in surprise, then looked at the sandwich in her hands. He didn't move at first. His face was a mix of shock and something else, something Kaya couldn't quite read. Was he embarrassed? Or just too surprised to accept a simple kindness? "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice hoarse from not speaking for what seemed like a long time. Kaya nodded eagerly, feeling the warmth of her decision spreading through her chest. "Yes, please. I don't need it right now. You do." He took the sandwich from her hands with gratitude, his fingers brushing lightly against hers. Kaya smiled and took a step back, feeling a sense of pride swelling in her chest. The man looked at her once more, this time his eyes filled with tears that he quickly wiped away. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'll never forget this." With that, Kaya nodded and turned to leave, not needing anything more than the knowledge that she had done something good. She walked home that day with a lighter heart, knowing that kindness, no matter how small, could make a difference. Little did she know, that small gesture would change the course of her day and set off a chain of events she could never have imagined. The next day, Kaya was on her usual walk home from school, still thinking about the man she had helped the day before. She didn't expect anything to come of it. Really, it was just a small, kind gesture in her eyes. But something about the way the man had looked at her, the softness in his eyes, stayed with her all day. She could still feel the warmth of his gratitude. It made her feel proud, like she had done something meaningful. As Kaya walked along the same path, she noticed a few people talking in hushed tones near the park. There were no familiar faces, just strangers who seemed to be discussing something seriously. Kaya wondered what it was about. She was curious, but she didn't stop to listen. She just kept walking, her footsteps light, her thoughts on the sandwich she had given away. When she reached the park bench where she had met the man, Kaya stopped, glancing around. The bench was empty now, but she still couldn't help looking for him. Maybe he'd be sitting there, resting, just like the day before. But there was no sign of him. Kaya felt a little disappointed but shrugged it off. People come and go in life, she thought, and maybe he was just on his way somewhere else. But just as she was about to walk away, she heard a voice behind her. It wasn't the man's voice, but it was familiar. Kaya turned to see one of the police officers from her neighborhood walking towards her. His name was Officer Williams, and he was friendly, always giving her a wave when she saw him around. She liked him because he was always kind to her, unlike some of the other adults who weren't so approachable. "Hey, Kaya," Officer Williams said with a smile, though his face looked a little more serious than usual. "How's it going?" Kaya smiled back and waved. "Hi, Officer Williams. I'm good, just walking home." "Great to hear. I was wondering if you could help me with something," he said, his voice a little quieter now. Kaya's smile faded slightly. "What do you need help with?" Officer Williams looked around, almost as if he was checking to make sure no one else was listening. "We're trying to get some information about a man who's been hanging around here lately. Do you remember seeing anyone yesterday? Maybe someone sitting on the bench." Kaya felt a little confused. "I saw a man sitting on the bench yesterday. He looked really tired. I gave him my sandwich." Officer Williams' eyebrows furrowed as he listened closely. "What did he look like? Could you describe him?" Kaya thought for a moment. He had messy hair, and his clothes were kind of torn. He looked really hungry, like he hadn't eaten in a while. The officer nodded slowly. "I see. And after you gave him the sandwich, did you see where he went?" Kaya shook her head. "No, I didn't see him leave. I just walked home." Officer Williams paused, then smiled warmly at Kaya. "Well, thank you for telling me, Kaya. It's really helpful. You did a good thing, giving him that sandwich." Kaya didn't fully understand what was going on, but she was glad the officer seemed pleased with her. Was he in trouble? She asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. Officer Williams hesitated for a moment, his expression changing slightly. "I'm not sure yet, but we're just trying to make sure everyone is okay. If you see him again, let us know, all right?" Kaya nodded, feeling a little uneasy. "Okay, I will." With that, Officer Williams turned and walked away, leaving Kaya standing there, her mind racing. Who was the man, and why was the officer asking about him? What did he need to be checked on? Kaya couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. But still, she couldn't help but hope the man was okay. She had given him the sandwich out of kindness, and that was all that mattered to her. What came of it was out of her hands. The next morning, Kaya could hardly concentrate at school. Thoughts of the man she had helped, and the visit from Officer Williams, kept running through her mind. Who was he? Why had the officer asked about him? Kaya kept replaying the conversation in her head. She had never imagined that her small, kind gesture would cause any trouble. After all, she had simply given a sandwich to someone who needed it. When Kaya got home later that day, her mother was sitting at the kitchen table, reading a book. The smell of freshly cooked dinner filled the house, and Kaya smiled as she walked in, feeling comforted by the familiar warmth of her home. But before she could say anything, Tasha, her mother, looked up and gave her a puzzled glance. "Kaya, did anything unusual happen today? Something about the park, maybe?" Tasha asked, her voice a little concerned. Kaya's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, confused. Tasha leaned back in her chair and set her book down. "I just saw a post on social media. There's a photo going around of you giving that man your sandwich. People are talking about it. I didn't realize you had become so, well, famous all of a sudden." Kaya felt her cheeks turn red. "Famous? But I didn't do anything special, Mom. I just gave him a sandwich." Tasha smiled warmly, understanding her daughter's innocence. "I know, sweetheart. But to others, it's a big deal. You know, helping people like that. It's rare. And when something rare happens, people notice. Kaya blinked, not fully grasping the attention the act had gotten. So, people are talking about it. Yes, Tasha replied. Some people are saying it's a beautiful thing you did, and others are asking if there's more to the story. They're curious about who the man is and why you helped him. Kaya felt a little uneasy. But I just helped him because he looked hungry. I didn't think it would cause a big thing. I know, sweetie, her mom said, reaching out to give her a reassuring hug. It's a good thing you did, and it shows how kind you are. But sometimes when people don't understand the full story, they can get curious or even confused. Kaya thought about it for a moment, still trying to make sense of everything. Do you think I did something wrong, Mom? No, not at all, Tasha said firmly. You did the right thing. But I think some people don't understand how simple acts of kindness can change things. Sometimes people make a bigger deal out of something because it's rare. It's good that you've made people think about kindness, but don't let it make you feel uncomfortable. Kaya nodded, feeling a little better after hearing her mother's words. But as she sat down to eat dinner that night, she couldn't stop thinking about the people who were talking about her, the ones who didn't understand the simple truth behind her actions. She just wanted them to know that she was helping because it felt like the right thing to do, not because she wanted attention or recognition. Later that evening, Kaya was getting ready for bed when her mom came into her room, holding her phone. She showed Kaya a message from a local community page. It was from someone who had seen the photo of Kaya and the man. Kaya, I just wanted to say how amazing it was that you helped that man yesterday. The message read, I hope others learn from your kindness. You've inspired me to do the same. Kaya smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. That's nice, she said softly, happy that her small act had touched someone. It wasn't about the attention, she realized, but about making the world a little better, one small step at a time. Even though she still didn't understand why her simple kindness had caused so much talk, Kaya felt proud of what she had done. The world may have been full of confusion and misunderstanding, but that didn't change the fact that she had made a difference, even if just for one person. And in her heart, that was enough. The next day, Kaya woke up to a strange feeling. She had been feeling so proud of herself the previous evening. But now something felt different, unsettling, even. She couldn't put her finger on it, but it felt like something big was happening, something she hadn't quite understood yet. Kaya went about her morning routine, having breakfast with her mom and getting ready for school. As she was finishing up, her mother, Tasha, walked into the room with a serious look on her face. Kaya immediately noticed the change in her mother's tone, and it made her heart race a little. Sweetheart, something happened today, Tasha said quietly, her voice almost cautious. There's someone here to see us. Kaya frowned. She didn't know who would be coming over at this hour. Who is it? Tasha hesitated, then said, 2 police officers. Kaya's stomach dropped. Police? What would the police want with her? She felt a mix of confusion and nervousness. The officers had already come by once before, asking her questions about the man she had helped. Did something happen to him? Had her simple act of kindness caused trouble? Her mother gently took her hand, offering her comfort. Don't worry, sweetie. They just want to ask some questions. I'm sure everything is fine. Kaya nodded but couldn't shake the unease she was feeling. Her mother led her to the living room, where 2 police officers were standing. One of them, Officer Williams, gave Kaya a kind smile, the same officer who had spoken to her in the park. But today, his smile wasn't as warm. Instead, his expression was serious, and it made Kaya feel even more uneasy. Kaya, I know we've spoken before, but we need to ask you some more questions about the man you helped yesterday, Officer Williams said, his voice calm but firm. Kaya felt her heart racing again. Is something wrong with him? Did he get into trouble? The officers exchanged a brief look before Officer Williams spoke again. We're not sure yet, but we need to ask some questions about his background. It's just part of the investigation. We want to make sure he's okay. Kaya could see that the officers weren't being mean. They were just doing their job. But the more they spoke, the more confused she became. Why was this becoming such a big deal? It was just a man who was hungry, and she helped him. That was it. "We know you're just trying to be kind, Kaya," Officer Williams continued. "But we need to understand more about the situation. Can you remember anything else about the man? Where did he go after you gave him the sandwich?" Kaya thought hard, trying to remember the details. She wasn't sure if she could offer any more useful information. She had only spoken to him for a few minutes. She hadn't noticed where he went after she left, other than that he seemed to be eating the sandwich. "I don't know. I just gave him the sandwich and walked home," Kaya said softly, feeling a little lost in the conversation. The other officer, Officer Harris, who was standing beside Officer Williams, gave a nod of understanding. "It's okay, Kaya. We just need to be thorough, that's all." Kaya's mother squeezed her hand, offering her a silent promise of support. "Is there anything else we can do to help?" she asked, her voice steady despite the situation. Officer Williams glanced at his partner before turning back to Tasha. "We just need to make sure we have all the facts. We appreciate your cooperation, and we'll let you know if we need anything further." After a few more minutes of questions, the officers finally left, promising to keep them updated if anything else came up. Kaya stood there for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. It seemed like her small act of kindness had spiraled into something much bigger, and she didn't fully understand why. As the door closed behind the officers, Kaya felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She didn't feel scared, she just felt tired. Tired of the confusion and the questions. All she had wanted to do was help someone who needed it. But despite all the questions and the strange feeling hanging in the air, Kaya couldn't let go of one thing. She had done the right thing. She had shown kindness when it was needed most. No matter what anyone said or how many questions were asked, Kaya knew deep down that the act of helping the man was never wrong. It was exactly what she had been taught to do. As her mother gave her a reassuring smile, Kaya's confidence returned. It wasn't about the attention or the questions. It was about doing what felt right in her heart. And nothing would change that. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind for Kaya. She couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Every time she walked by the park, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. She kept asking herself why such a small act of kindness had caused so much attention. It had only been a sandwich, just a simple gesture. Why did everyone care so much about it? At school, Kaya overheard some of her classmates talking about the story. They were discussing how brave she had been, giving food to a homeless man. Some of them even called her a hero, but that didn't sit right with Kaya. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She had just seen someone who needed help and decided to do what felt right. She didn't understand why others were making such a big deal out of it. Still, it made her feel a little uncomfortable. She just wanted things to go back to normal. But no matter where she went, someone would always bring it up. Her friends at school, people in the grocery store, even her neighbors were talking about the sandwich. While it felt nice to be recognized, it also made Kaya feel like she was under a microscope, her every move being watched and analyzed. One afternoon, when Kaya got home from school, she found her mother sitting at the kitchen table with a concerned look on her face. She was looking at something on her phone, her fingers tapping the screen anxiously. "Mom?" Kaya asked, her voice filled with worry. "What's wrong?" Tasha glanced up, her face softening when she saw her daughter's concerned expression. "It's nothing to worry about, sweetie. I just saw something online. It's about you." Kaya froze. "About me?" she asked, her heart racing. "What is it? Is it bad?" Her mother shook her head. "No, nothing bad. It's just more people talking about what happened. There's a lot of attention now, and not all of it is good." Kaya's stomach twisted. She had been afraid of this. She had heard rumors of people making negative comments online, and she wasn't sure how to feel about it. She had helped someone in need, and now it felt like everyone was judging her for it. "Some people are saying that you should have done more," Tasha continued. That you should have done more for him, or that you could have done something different. But you did what you could. Don't let anyone tell you that you should have done more. Kaya bit her lip, trying to process what her mother had said. She didn't want to let the comments affect her, but it was hard. She felt like people were taking her simple, kind act and turning it into something bigger, something she didn't want. I didn't do it for attention, Mom, Kaya said, her voice trembling slightly. I just wanted to help him. I didn't think people would care this much. Tasha smiled warmly at her daughter. I know, honey. I know. You did it because you're kind, and that's what matters. You can't control what others say, but you can control how you react to it. People can talk, but that doesn't change your heart. Kaya felt comforted by her mother's words, but the truth was, the pressure was beginning to get to her. She just wanted things to go back to the way they were, without the constant questions, without the attention. She was starting to feel overwhelmed by the situation. That evening, Kaya took a walk around the neighborhood, trying to clear her mind. As she walked, she passed the park where she had given the sandwich to the man. This time, the bench was empty, and it almost felt like things were back to normal. But Kaya knew better than to think things would stay the same. Her act of kindness had changed everything. And no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the consequences of that decision were still unfolding around her. As she walked back home, Kaya made a promise to herself. She couldn't control how others reacted to her actions, but she could control her own heart. She would continue to help others when she saw they needed it, no matter what anyone said or thought. She couldn't let the opinions of strangers take away the joy she felt from doing the right thing. And so, as the days went on, Kaya kept her head high. She didn't let the negativity get to her. She didn't need anyone's approval. She knew she had done the right thing. And that was all that mattered. The days that followed felt like they were dragging on. Kaya's heart had been lifted by the kindness she had shown. But now, every little thing seemed to be weighed down by the unexpected attention. Even her usual routine felt different. Every time she stepped outside, it seemed like there was someone watching her, or at least someone talking about her. Some people smiled and waved, offering kind words, while others gave her questioning looks or whispers behind her back. At school, it was no better. Kaya was used to the quiet, predictable atmosphere of her classroom, but now it felt like all eyes were on her. A lot of the students in her class were talking about the sandwich she had given to the homeless man, and while most of them were positive, some made Kaya feel a little uncomfortable. Some kids wanted to know everything: what the man looked like, where he went after she helped him, and even why she chose to give him her lunch. They didn't understand, and they kept pressing her for answers. It felt like her simple act of kindness had turned into something it was never meant to be. One afternoon after school, Kaya felt a familiar pull in her chest, the need to escape the conversation swirling around her. She decided to take a walk to the park, where it had all started. The weather was warm, and the fresh air seemed like the perfect way to clear her mind. The walk gave her a sense of peace she hadn't felt all week. She felt like she could breathe again, like she wasn't being watched or judged for her decisions. As she approached the park, she saw someone sitting on the bench where she had met the man. It was an older woman, dressed warmly and sitting quietly with a bag by her side. Kaya felt an urge to approach her, not because she was trying to make up for anything, but because something about the woman's solitude reminded her of the man. The way he had sat there the day before, tired and alone, made Kaya want to offer her kindness once more. She walked over slowly, her feet crunching the fallen leaves beneath her. The woman noticed her approach and smiled softly. Kaya smiled back, hesitantly at first, unsure of how to begin. "Hi," Kaya said, her voice gentle but sincere. "Do you need anything? I have a sandwich left from lunch." The woman's eyes brightened at the offer, but she shook her head with a warm laugh. "Oh, thank you, sweetie, but I'm fine. I was just resting here for a bit." Kaya felt a little embarrassed, but also relieved that she hadn't been rejected in the same way she had feared. "Okay," she said with a shy smile. "I just thought I'd ask." The woman nodded in understanding. "It's kind of you to offer," she said kindly. "Sometimes, just a small gesture like that can make someone's day. You've got a good heart." Kaya felt a wave of warmth flood through her. The woman's words were comforting, reminding her that it wasn't about seeking attention or praise. It was about doing something that felt right. The kindness Kaya had shared with the man yesterday was enough. It didn't matter if other people misunderstood or judged it. What mattered was the impact it had on that person, however small or big it might have been. The woman gave Kaya a soft look before picking up her bag. "It's a beautiful day, isn't it? A perfect day to be kind to others." Kaya nodded, feeling lighter. She said goodbye to the woman and walked back home, a little less burdened by the attention that had followed her actions. She couldn't control what others thought, but she could control how she acted moving forward. When she arrived home, her mother was waiting for her at the door with a smile. "How was your walk, sweetie?" "It was nice," Kaya replied, her voice steadier now. "I think I needed it." Tasha looked at her daughter, her eyes filled with pride. "You've had a lot of attention recently, huh?" Kaya nodded, feeling a bit tired from everything. "Yeah. People keep talking about it." Her mother gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done something kind, Kaya. Some people won't understand, but others will always appreciate it. It's the way the world works sometimes." Kaya smiled, feeling comforted. "I know, Mom. I think I'm learning that the real reward is in the helping, not the attention." Her mother nodded, proud of her daughter's maturity. "That's right, sweetie. And don't ever forget that the world needs more people like you." Kaya went to bed that night feeling a little more at peace with herself. She had done the right thing, and that was enough for her. Whether people talked about her or not, her heart knew that helping someone in need was the best reward she could ever ask for. Kaya woke up the next morning feeling different. It wasn't the usual excitement she felt when the sun rose, but rather a quiet sense of uncertainty. The past few days had been a roller coaster, filled with questions, attention, and a whole lot of thinking. Every time she left her house, she felt like she was being watched, like people were waiting for her to do something else, something more. But Kaya didn't want to be the center of attention anymore. She just wanted things to go back to normal, to be like they were before all of this. When Kaya stepped out of the house that morning, she noticed something that made her pause. The streets were busier than usual. People walking their dogs, kids heading to school, and cars rushing by. But there was something else too, a quiet murmuring from a group of people standing near the corner of the street. Kaya's heart sank as she realized they were talking about her. She tried to ignore it, to keep walking like she hadn't heard anything, but the whispers followed her. She could feel their eyes on her back. As she walked past the group, one of the women turned to look at Kaya, her eyes wide with admiration. "You're the little girl, aren't you?" she asked, her voice filled with surprise. Kaya's face turned red, and she quickly looked away, unsure of how to respond. Yes, that was me," she muttered, wishing she could disappear into the crowd. "Wow, what you did was amazing." The woman continued. "I saw the story online. I can't believe how brave you are." Kaya gave a small smile, but inside, she was feeling uncomfortable. She wasn't brave. She had just done what felt right, but she didn't know how to explain that to the woman. Instead, she simply nodded and hurried on her way, eager to get away from the attention. At school, things didn't get any better. As soon as Kaya entered her classroom, several of her classmates crowded around her, asking questions. "So, what happened to the man? Is he okay?" one of them asked eagerly. Kaya shrugged. "I don't know. I just gave him the sandwich and left." Another girl chimed in. "You're a hero. I bet you changed his whole life." Kaya felt a pang in her chest. She didn't want to be called a hero. She didn't want people to think that she was special for doing something so simple. She had just shared her lunch with a man who was hungry. That's all. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," Kaya said softly. "I just thought he needed help." Her words seemed to confuse her classmates. They didn't understand. They couldn't understand. But that was okay. Kaya realized that sometimes people just needed to see things in a bigger way, a way that wasn't so simple. She had helped because it felt right, and she didn't need anyone else's approval to feel proud of her actions. By the time school was over, Kaya was exhausted. She just wanted to go home and relax, away from all the questions and the attention. She walked quickly, hoping no one would stop her on the way. But as she rounded the corner to her house, she saw something that made her stop in her tracks. There, standing at the end of her driveway, was the man she had helped. He was sitting on the ground, leaning against a tree, just like he had been the day before. But this time, he wasn't alone. A few people stood around him, talking and pointing, looking at him with interest. Kaya felt her heart race. What was going on? Why was he back? She took a deep breath and walked toward him, determined to see if he was okay. As she got closer, the man looked up and smiled, recognizing her immediately. "Hey there, little one," he said in a raspy voice, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I was hoping I'd see you again." Kaya felt a sense of relief wash over her. "I'm glad you're okay," she said softly. "I was worried about you." The man chuckled lightly. "I'm doing all right, thanks to you. You really made a difference yesterday." Kaya shook her head. "It was just a sandwich. I didn't do anything special." "You did more than that," the man said, his voice sincere. "You reminded me that there's kindness in the world. You gave me hope." Kaya blinked, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't expected such a deep reaction. All she had done was offer a simple meal to someone who was hungry, but hearing the man's words made her realize that her small act of kindness had meant more than she could have ever imagined. As the crowd around them began to disperse, Kaya felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. Maybe things hadn't gone the way she thought they would, and maybe the attention was overwhelming. But in that moment, standing in front of the man who had appreciated her kindness, Kaya understood something important. Kindness wasn't about being recognized. It wasn't about being a hero. It was simply about doing what you can to help someone in need. And in that moment, Kaya realized that was enough. She didn't need anyone to make her. Kaya spent the next few days reflecting on everything that had happened. The attention, the questions, and the way people treated her, it had all been overwhelming. At first, she had wished for everything to go back to the way it was before, to the quiet and simple days where no one noticed her for anything other than being just a little girl. But now, she saw things differently. She realized that sometimes, when you do something kind, it can stir up more than you expect. But despite all the confusion and the way people had reacted, one thing had remained clear in her heart. She had done the right thing. She hadn't helped the man for any reward or praise. She had simply acted on instinct, seeing someone in need and offering what she could. And that, Kaya thought, was the true meaning of kindness. One afternoon, as Kaya sat in the park, her mind finally felt clear. It was the same spot where she had met the man, and she looked around, taking in the familiar sights, the tall trees, the rustling leaves, the benches where people sat, sometimes talking, sometimes just resting. It all felt peaceful, and for the first time in days, Kaya felt like she could breathe without feeling the weight of everyone's expectations. As she sat on the same bench where she had once offered the sandwich, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She knew that her act had been small, but it had been genuine. And that was something that couldn't be taken away by anyone's opinions or judgments. It was a part of her, something that came from her heart. As she sat there, she saw Officer Williams walking through the park, his eyes scanning the area. When he spotted Kaya, he waved and walked over to her with a friendly smile. "Hey, Kaya," Officer Williams said warmly. "How's everything going?" Kaya smiled back, relieved to see someone she could talk to without feeling awkward. "It's going okay," she replied. "I've been thinking a lot." "I bet," he said, taking the seat beside her. "It's not every day someone's kindness gets this much attention." Kaya nodded. I didn't mean for any of it to happen, but I'm learning to be okay with it. I helped because it felt like the right thing to do. I don't need anyone's approval to know I did the right thing." Officer Williams looked at her with admiration. "That's exactly the attitude to have. You showed a lot of courage and compassion. Not everyone would have done what you did." Kaya felt a little proud of herself, though she didn't need anyone else to tell her she had done well. She had learned that her actions had been true to her heart, and that was enough. It wasn't about being praised. It was about helping when it was needed, no matter the consequences. As they talked, Kaya noticed something else. The park felt just as it always had. People walked by, went about their day, and the world continued on. In the end, the attention from others would fade, and the world would keep turning. But the kindness she had shown, the simple act of giving when someone needed it, that would remain with her forever. "Thanks for talking to me," Kaya said as Officer Williams stood up to leave. "Anytime, Kaya," he said, giving her a reassuring smile. "You've got a good heart. Don't let anything change that." As he walked away, Kaya looked around the park once more, her heart lighter than it had been in days. She had learned something valuable through everything that had happened. Kindness didn't need to be recognized. It didn't need to be explained. It was just something that you did when you saw someone in need, something that came from deep inside. Kaya walked back home that afternoon with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a while. The world might not always understand acts of kindness, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that she had made a difference, and that was more than enough for her.